Hello and welcome to this deep dive on the Minecraft song, the original Minecraft theme from Volume Alpha. The project is actually really small, so we're just going to walk through the whole thing. I'm not going to categorize anything. I'm just going to go top to bottom. Normally my songs are like 100-something tracks. This is 35 minus things that I just flattened out that I didn't even use in the project. So probably like 30 tracks total. So I'm going to shut the camera off and let's just get into it. Okay. So starting at the very top, wow, there's actually quite a few things. So stuff that I didn't use at all. The guide for the Minecraft song is at the very top. You saw this in the video, and that is the actual song. Right, so I just put the song, I had to like, did I warp it? I warped it a little bit, but I tried to get the timing as close as possible. 106 was like pretty close to where I thought it was going to be. It might have been a little bit off, but I smoothed it out. And then I went and I listened very carefully and I chopped it up according to where I thought the song changed. And I had a little back and forth with Dan, the editor, and we weren't, I guess he hears it starting like the melody should start here. Right? And then that loops. But I always hear it starting here. Which is, I don't know which one's right, honestly, but I think like if you just listen super closely, the very first note, it ends up, I think, starting the way that I imagine it, but it doesn't. Ambient music is interesting because sometimes you just kind of hear what you hear, and that's totally fine. But I structured it this way, assuming my version of it, and there were these clear breaks in the song where maybe a new instrument came in, or some sort of, I don't know, maybe the piano got louder, or there was a layer or something else. And then there was a lot of like repeat where the energy seemed to be really big, so I kind of made this all the same. And that's where like you'll see it in my track where I kind of made sure that became a section. And then we start getting the outro, which actually, you can sort of see it in the waveform. It actually sort of happens here. And then it just fades out. And there's like a little twinkle. You can like hear this little ding dong little bell thing. And that's the only like new instrument minus maybe some sort of guitar sound. And that's all I had to work with, so I had to figure out what to do with that. So I embellished on a lot of things and sort of, made some decisions on instruments and sounds that I would have to add that weren't part of the original arrangement in order to make this whole thing, to create the illusion of a Doom main menu theme or something like that. Okay, and then the next parts, the guides, you saw this in the video as well, is not much to say, it's just piano. This is how I sort of tried to understand how the song was. I did it by ear, this whole section here. It's really interesting that the song is the same loop, and then there's like this one little section where it's different. And then the song is the same loop again for the rest. And I think the chords change, but the main melody stays the same for basically the rest of the song. I tried to do the bell thing by ear. The bell part is very weird. Let me play this for you. And the tough part about the bell is that there's a lot of like overtones in a bell sound. Like it's not just a straight note. So sometimes I had to like guess. I wasn't totally sure, like this low note, I'm not totally sure if that's the right one. Some of these really high ones, I'm not totally sure, but it doesn't matter that much. I ended up adding a lot of melodies that weren't part of the original song at all. So, this is just a guide for me to figure out. One thing that it did help me with quite a bit though is this middle piece here is where I started changing, recontextualizing, as I would say, the key of the song. So I started doing these bass notes, and that's how I figured out essentially like what the chord structure of the song was going to be. This song doesn't really have much of a chord structure. It feels very flowy, it feels very free. Notes just kind of happen, which is nice. But I wanted something with just a little more structure, so, you know, this is where I was like, I'm gonna test the waters with this, like, minor key thing. And then you can see the bass notes change, and that introduces, like, the illusion of a new chord. For example, this is like, this chord progression is also very standard and somewhat predictable. You hear it a lot. I hear it in movies all the time. And I do this kind of walk up, you know? And we'll just let it play out. This was interesting, because then it goes right into the drums. I really like that. I kept that part. This is a musical trick where technically it's in a minor key, or you know, the scale is a minor scale that it's playing in. And then for this transition to create tension, the root note is the flat second, which is a totally different scale. And it doesn't sound quite right, and you don't want it to sound like that anymore, so that's kind of where the tension comes from. The notes don't totally match up, but it's got this kind of like ominous sound. Flat second it's very common in Doom. You know, almost all of the guitar bends, like the pow, that sound, there's a moment of a flat second in there. So food for thought. So that was the only musical trick. Let's get into the sounds. So I'm going to come back to the pad thing. We're going to start with the main melody here. So the main melody is this. That is an instance of Serum. And for a little background, I did a little bit of like synthy rack sound design where I started with something. You'll notice down here, oh, I didn't mean to do that. You'll notice down here I have all these knobs with automation on. That's what the little red dot means. And I created like a plucky synth that tonally will change over time, because I knew, and you can see it right here, I knew that the song needed the same instruments over time, but something about them needed to change or else it was going to be boring. So I started choosing parameters after I kind of got the tone down of like the simple synth. I started choosing parameters like, let's see, where is filter? Is it a later filter? Mod wheel. Oh, I have it hooked up to the mod wheel. That's why I can't see it. So I have a low pass, high pass filter thing going on, or I think it's just a low pass filter. I'm changing the sustain of, is it this one? It's so funny I can't see it. Sustain right here, and this is hooked up to, okay. I'm like, I was wondering why I can't see anything. Okay, so the sustain is hooked up to the envelope 1 of the volume. So as I can just play this for you as an example. As I change that knob, you change the sustain. Same with the filter. It's pretty extreme. Noise level, that's another thing. I have this noise here, so if I were to turn this noise off. Totally different texture, right? Detune, connected to this guy right here. Let's get some more volume so you can hear it. Right? And then last but not least, I have this second oscillator as a sub bass. And because it's running through some distortion, which we can see down below. Do I have distortion here? Oh, it might just be in the, yeah, it's in the effects here. Because this is running through distortion, the sub isn't really meant to be an actual sub, it's mostly just for texture. Because when you run a sub bass alongside some higher oscillators together through distortion, oftentimes the sub quality, the lowness of it gets removed because the distortion ruins the waveform, but as a result you get these textures because the very slow movement of the low notes of the sub bass interact with the distortion and the high notes together. So you get, let me see if I can turn up sustain real quick. You hear the difference there? It starts to, you get a lower tone, obviously, because of the sub. But you get this buzzing because this is the sound of the actual, the sub's slower waveform interacting in an audible way with the tube distortion. And as I go higher, you'll get more sub back. Yeah, now you can hear it because it's not in that subby range. It's kind of cool, huh? So I made a bunch of instruments like that, and this is one of them. This is the first main synth. You can see the filter, and you can kind of see the course of the entire song in the automation. You know, the filter's changing, the main melody's getting a special treatment, and then it builds up and ramps back down. Same with the sustain. Noise level gets some fancy stuff. I really, right when the drums end, it goes like that, so that's why I'm doing that. Detune, it's got its own flavor, so I'm doing some different stuff, and then sub is super cut and dry. Just bring it in for the middle pink part, essentially, and then, you know, back down. So, and then what are the rest of this stuff? Just control. I'm just controlling the fact that this is playing a bunch of different notes, trying to manage, flatten it out even more. It's a pluck, so you gotta do what you gotta do. Swimming pool reverb, so handy. And then some EQ here. This is the main melody. No sub, I totally got rid of it. And then, let's see, you got some even more EQ, which is a really strange shape. I'm not super sure what's going on there. I was having some trouble with the lows. Oh, this is, yeah, it's just trouble with the lows. I thought it was sidechain. I might be getting ahead of myself. And then a filter sweep. This is, so, a lot of things happening on a single instrument, which is somewhat atypical for my more metal stuff. Single instruments don't get this much treatment usually, but you're laser focused on it in these songs. You know, things are floating around, so they have to be more subtle. On top of that is another layer. It's a high octave, and that is Vacuum Pro. Obviously more swimming pool as well. And so I did that just so as the melodies start getting drowned out by all the other instruments, if you double down on the melody, I basically stack it as an octave, you can hear it again. And some of the feedback I had in the early versions were like, hey, I think it's really cool. We started losing the main melody, which is the nostalgic part, and I was like, that's a good point. So that's why I asked Minecraft savvy folks for feedback on this. Okay, the thing that I skipped was this pad. So I wanted some sort of, I wanted something unique, I guess you could say, to this song that was something that would happen in Doom but probably wouldn't happen in this type of Minecraft ambient music, especially C418 stuff. So I have these kind of just big sweeping chords that emphasize the bass notes of the song. So let's have a listen. Yeah, so pretty big. That octave jump, by the way, there's no pitch bending or anything. it's, I think I can even show you. I have two things. I have the Mosaic Voices and Vacuum Pro together. But this guy right here, this knob, is the which octave should the oscillator be. So you can automate that. So I can make it go like like that, and you can actually hear stuff like that a lot in Doom, which I think is really cool. Set that back up. So I'm going to play that again, and now watch this knob. Ready? So that's what that comes from. A little bit of a delay in the sound coming out versus what you saw in the UI, but you know, that's how audio engineering works. Let's play these two separately so you can hear what this is doing. That is Mosaic Voices. It's a sampler. It's kind of like a, you know, if I just took a sample of somebody going, oh, you know, but it has its own hand-picked stuff. And then Vacuum Pro alone. Very crunchy. And there's some tube saturation on Vacuum Pro as well. That's where I think all the crunch comes from. And there's nothing on Mosaic Voices. Yep, and then with some EQ. How's the filter movement looking? Let's see. Okay, so it's starting off at the beginning of that. It's the high end is cut out. It's pretty subtle though, and part of the reason it's especially subtle is because it gets washed out by Comet, which is at, I think this is 100% wet. So you're just hearing the reverb version of this. I wonder what this sounds like with no reverb on it. I bet it sounds bad, or it could be too loud. So let's find out. Did you see that automation? Okay, so it was 100% wet at the end. So that creates the big whooshing reverb tail. So I have a little bit of reverb, and then by the time it ends, it crosses to 100, so it kind of goes and, you know, fades itself in. Comet also is one of those weird reverbs that if you do this and you just expect it to go from 0 to 100, it doesn't. It gradually goes over the course of like 200 milliseconds or something. So you have to just do it by ear with Comet. Some of the other reverbs are different. Some of the other reverbs are bad, and as you change parameters, they actually, like, the sound of the reverb gets messed up. The thing that I really like about Comet as a sound design tool is they figured out that people were going to do that anyway, so they built in some kind of fail-safes, and the side effects of you doing things like changing these knobs on the fly can be quite pleasing, and sometimes can be used in ways that probably aren't intended. You know, I make risers a lot by having it all the way to wet, and then I'll just show you. I can just do it right here. I can change the size. See? So as that reverb was tailing out, it was recalculating what the size should be. Now the big question is, okay, I'm like, what was it before? It recalculates the size, and then it will create a slope of sound, and it'll just like catch up, and then you can do some really weird stuff. And the decay works the same way too, and some of these others do. Really like that tool. Okay, so that's all that is, and it's just a bunch of EQ and other things to fit. This is me just doing last minute ear stuff. Let me play that in context too, so you can hear where the pad notes and stuff come in. There you go. Okay, let's move on to the Screeches, or also known as ugly blasts. I actually have how I made them over here, but the end result sounds something kind of like this. That is just a synthesizer. So that's Vacuum Pro. I think it's a preset. And I couldn't tell you which one it is, but I just found something that sounded kind of weird and funky. And then, and can I just play this right now? I probably can just play it for you as well. Hold on. Okay. That's what it sounds like on its own. But if you can see here, I made these weird, like, clumpy notes that make no sense. Okay? The clumpy notes of different shapes and sizes with no rhyme or reason are just weirdly timed things that I dump into the reverb and see what comes out the other side. I feel like these look like little countries. But there's no specific notes that I had in mind for this. I was just kind of, at any rate, basically I was just slamming my hands on the keyboard, if you think about it. And they end up, you know, as you create weird combinations of highs and lows, this one is like super high and super low, you get different interactions with the reverb and with the, let's see if there's a delay, echo cat, yeah. So I got a delay on there too, stereo ping pong. And I bet this is the swimming pool again. Yes, it is. So let me show you a couple of examples here. Heard that high one started off, it was kind of cool. That one has a really late one, so it gets like the extra echo cat. Sounds like a weird, like, trumpet, kind of, you know, or like a bunch of ugly trumpets. That was cool. That ended on a long note, that's why. Yeah. So that's fun, super easy to make. You know, if you don't like the tone of something, like I have a big fuzz pedal on here, I probably added it after because I thought it didn't sound as mean. And then, unsurprisingly, I had to use Soothe to deal with the fact that this sounds arguably bad. You know, like Soothe is saving the sound that probably does not sound pleasant to the ear. So it's a handy tool for that kind of thing. So that's all that was, and those are just added in places for transition. So I have a little, you know, it's a blast. You can see that it just starts, but I actually have it ramping up in volume, so you end up with something a little smoother. It sounds like this. And in context, that is a transition. Yep, that's what that is. Okay, let's do ghostly and let's do the ghostly stuff. I don't have the exact patch for this, but it doesn't really matter because the way in which I get the basic effect for it is the only important part, and then the input sounds are totally up to you. So I've been messing around with this plugin called Dumpster Fire, and also a plugin called Backmask, which are both by Freak Show Industries, and they're free plugins actually. They're a pay-if-you-want plugin, so they are excellent. And Dumpster Fire is like a weird, almost like a formant pitch shifter of some sort. It's very unique and strange. And then Backmask is it's kind of like a delay, but it actually is a reverse delay. So it takes the sound based on either a trigger or a timer, and it will play it back in reverse. And you can get some weird interactions with this. So I pulled out, and for context, actually, I'm going to show you this sound first, and then I'll show you the demo that I have over here. This is what the ghostly sound is. It's the main melody. Okay, and it ramps up in volume and intensity and stuff. Right. And then the end and beginning, so the beginning is... It's like the same idea, but it just has a different like input sound, you know? Yep, and so this one was like the one from Mars that has I was wondering why it was crackling, because I have the convolution, it's not even a reverb, it's just like a filter. Light bell makes it, kind of rounds it right out. Very spacey. So the way that I made that, for the most part, is I started with an input sound. This is, I think it's the same pluck that I showed you from earlier. Is it the same main melody layer? Different oscillator, but almost exactly the same. So I probably just hit these arrows and I changed it. Start with that, and then let me disable these. We'll do them one at a time. Can you play for me? There we go. So, start with any sort of sound. I just have a pluck. I can even do this. It's actually sounding a lot like the other sound now. Okay. And then dumpster fire. And I have this adjusted a certain way, but I can move it around. Big change already. It's totally smoothed it out. It seems to be like replaying some of the sounds. Now if I do this, you can see these different things. But if I change like... Dumpster fire is pretty cool. Tons of detune. Okay, I like that. Let's keep that. Okay, now I have Echo Cat doing the delay. You can hear it fading out. Okay, and now with all of that together, Backmask, which is doing reverse. So it's going to grab anything. These interfaces are funny because I actually have to like search to see what they do. It's by trigger, so anytime anything is above negative 45 dB in volume, which is the vast majority of the sounds, it's going to reverse the sound and play it back. So that also includes the delay tail. Pretty neat, huh? I never really know exactly what it's going to do. And then, to make the screechy part, or to do anything, I can just smash my hand on the keyboard. Sorry, I bet you didn't like that very much. Last thing is reverb. So, cutting off most of the low end there, make it not as warm. And that's that. You should check out the Freak Show industry stuff if you haven't. And if you don't want to spend any money, it's also free. And that's why they do it. So, yep. Got to update After Effects. Okay. We got more stuff to get through. Moving on. The ambient noise. There's Doom doesn't do only melodic stuff for their ambient parts. It's like there's a lot of like just type of thing going on. So I have this is an atmosphere like long sample that I made, which is basically just a big reverb on top of somebody using a wood chipper. And it sounds like this. So it's kind of got a grumble, it kind of gets louder and softer depending on how many logs are being fed into it, I guess. And I think I might have even pitched it down, so when I did the reverb it was extra slow. This is a different one where it's not pitched down. You can hear the chipper actually. And then I have another one that's the same idea, but it's a snowblower instead of a wood chipper. So you just get these ambient noise things. And you pair it up with the melody. It just adds just a little extra. It just fills up space. Super easy to make those too. Nope, snowblower. High screeches, screeches flat. Oh, so the screeches, this high screeches thing. Remember when I was talking about the little bell melody that I couldn't figure out the melody for? That's this right here. And that's Vacuum Pro. It's very similar to some of the other ones that I showed you where it's Vacuum Pro and Trash, and then I have like Echo Cat and the swimming pool. So this I'm pretty sure was like a recycled sound. Yeah, I made this part first. I recognize this. I made this first, and then I made the really ugly sounding trumpet blast things. That's why it looks familiar. Yeah, there it is. Vacuum Pro, Trash, Pro Q3. Vacuum Pro, Trash, Pro Q3. So basically the same setup as the really ugly things, except I'm playing pretty notes this time. These pretty notes right here, instead of playing random notes that sound gross. Every instrument can be anything if you dream hard enough. Okay, next part are the drums. I have two layers here. I have your stereotype, this is Native Instruments Action Strikes, and it's kind of like Damage, but you know, it's just big taiko drums and other things, and that sounds like this. You can, I mean, it's crunchy because I have the tube saturation all the way up. And then I have a bunch of reverb. I think the swimming pool reverb, and then even more. So Comet does a really good job at, I can dial in like I want more highs or more lows and all that stuff. So that's where that comes from. And then underneath it I have a synth kick, and this is kick 2. The reason I did the synth kick is because big action drums are really not typical for Doom, but synth kicks are. So I figured having the impact of a long synth kick would make more sense. Really, really long tail. And then I liked the wideness of the big drums. So you get a little bit of both. So the synth kick is where all the meat of this drum part is. And you can see right here, I'm actually doing some sidechain compression according to the synth kick. So these big tom drums are getting reduced in volume in all of the important low end areas. Yeah, one thing to note here is I could even go harder with this, but I have the ratio high and the attack 0, and then the release is just kind of managing how much extra space I want to give it. This is also, oftentimes I don't do this, but I have this on free mode because the low synth kick, you know, it has that really long like, sound, and I didn't actually want to pick that up. I wanted the volume of this low end to sort of come back in faster, and it creates a little bit of interaction, and it can, you know, it doesn't fully sidechain, so you can start kind of, you know, maybe getting some woofing or like some low end like woo type stuff. And I thought it sounded fine, so I didn't let it fade it. I didn't let it get cut off as for the entirety of this kick, this long tail. That was a little bit of a jumble of a sentence, but hopefully you understand what I mean. Guitars. So I actually did all the guitars in a separate project. I really hope it doesn't crash. Okay, whew. I actually had a lot of problems with crashing in this project for some reason, and I think it was, it might have been Kali. For some reason, sometimes this like won't load properly, and then it'll just, my project will be busted and it won't load, and I don't know what's going on with that. But I recorded these in a separate project, and then I just imported the group. And I have a couple of different layers here. We've got this kind of texture-y intro. I'm just doing harmonics. It's funny, I actually tuned the one string I needed to play the root note for this. I tuned it like just that one string to the right note, and then played these harmonics, because the natural harmonics will only sound right if the whole string is in that tuning. So for like a couple of minutes, my guitar was in the weirdest tuning ever just to be able to do this. This is a repeat loop. I cheated here. I pitched that up by 1 semitone. And also, you can see this here. I go in to make sure the rhythm is on time. I double, triple check that my picking is right on the money. So I had to warp this. This is a DI signal. I had to warp this to just make sure that it was perfectly rhythmic, because there's nothing like an ambient song where you want to vibe to the rhythm, but the rhythm is not on beat. Nobody likes that. So now this. Question. Okay, it does. I was like, does this hit when it comes in? It does. But both of them, those two low guitars, are filtered with Volcano. So you get this slow ramp up, right? And then we just get into, I guess, the meat and potatoes of it, where, you know, it's doing that same rhythm for a while. I have a what's it called, a palm muting rhythm here, these top two. But I also wanted the benefit of like the big, loud, wide guitar, where when it's not palm muted, when you play it out. So these lower ones are played out, like full sustain. And so I have like a little bit of both, where it ends up being like a more pick-defined, sustained guitar. I don't know. It's a weird blend, doing both techniques in one go. You can hear the added benefit of it starts to increase the tension as this open string version gets louder and louder and louder, because it fills up more space. And then the last part that's worth noting is I played a very specific part for the drums, and it's just a repeat lick that goes like this. Actually, the only time a bass guitar is included in the song, just for this one part. I brought the whole band in. You get something like this. Pretty intense, huh? The top layer is me bending a single string while playing another open string at the same time. It's an octave, but I'm bending one. It also explains why when I play it solo, it sounds like I'm messing up a bunch of times, and you don't even notice it in the final product because so many things are happening. But yeah, that was actually really hard to play. Made my fingers hurt. What's next? Thumper. This thing was like the star of the show for half of it. Yeah, so this is a serum patch of what looks like the most basic of shapes. And there's another tube saturator. After that, you can tell I made this a while ago because I'm still using EQ8. I've moved on to Pro Q3 almost exclusively since then. I've got another tube saturator layer, so I am saturating this thing. And when you change the EQ and use saturation like that, the tone does change quite a bit. And then, sorry, this is jumping around a little bit. I have a layer that has a guitar cab. Is this Zilla? Yeah. That might explain why things were crashing. Zilla and Kali together don't play nice for some reason. So I have it's a little bit quieter. But it's a room, this is a room mic. Yeah, that room mic. And then this is the main sound. You might have noticed that it sounded like the volume was getting quieter for a second there, and things were like crackling a little bit. That's because I have this sidechained to the next sound, which I'll show in a second. But yeah, so just doing, this is back on the thumping bass, you know, just doing some EQ to clean up the mids and things like that. I have a track spacer, probably a swimming pool here. Yep, swimming pool. I'm using the same reverb for everything to give it the same feeling. Everything's coming from the same place. And then the side chains to the kick, but mostly to this low rumble. So this low rumble, I don't have the source for it, but it is basically just a square. And it's a single note slightly pitched down over time. So it's like that. And it's a square oscillator, detuned. And I have a filter that's adjusting the volume and the low pass. And then there's almost definitely a tube after it. And as you can see in the waveform, you know, it goes from this kind of low, a little bit more kind of sparing, transient sound to being a very full sound by the time it gets to the middle, and then it sort of goes in reverse and fades out at the end. Yeah, and there's some movement, and there's probably, maybe there's like, if it was Serum, I might even have like hyper on there, you know, which is like a chorus, essentially, with some phaser-y type stuff. So you get all this cool movement. Yep, and then the filter is applied as it fades out. So that's all there is to it. Yeah, and so working with the Thumper thing here, you'll notice that the volume gets louder and softer. So I have that side chained to this compression, and so when they're playing together, okay. See what I'm saying? It ducks it out as the volume comes in so that they're not fighting with each other. And it creates, even though the song itself has a lot going on at that point, it creates a lot of subtle movement. You can feel the low end shifting as all of the stuff is happening above it. This was the next thing, sorry. The next thing is a really nice discovery. I didn't realize I had this, but there's a plugin called Mysteria that's like this awesome performance tool, set of a couple of different Native Instruments performance tools. And one of the performance tools is a couple of different samples of people doing overtone singing. It turns out, excuse me, that the overtone singing is in the exact same key of this song, and I didn't have to change anything to make it sound that way. I loaded it up and I clicked it and I went, you gotta be kidding me. This is the exact same key. We're using it. And Doom has some overtone stuff, so yeah, and that movement is the performance tool itself. There's an XY pad, and as I drag it around the pad, it's called Mysteria, so please Google that, you'll like it. As I drag it around the pad, it starts changing parameters. It's kind of like the synth dials I have, but it's in an easier interface. So any of this movement where it kind of goes like and stuff, that's me with an automated thing that I like drew in or I performed and recorded. Let's keep going. Yeah, this thing added a ton of texture in the beginning, so that was really cool. Toned fat thumping. What part is this playing? Guitarish reese. Oh, okay. I don't want to play that yet because there are these two parts. So when it gets to kind of, this is the almost the end of it. You know, we are getting through this entire project, which is I have not done before. I usually have to cherry pick. The melody part, the high synth part that starts playing about a third of the way into the song are these layers. And I'll play this for context. If it doesn't crash. Come on. There we go. That's the top one. And that's the bottom one. So a couple of different layers here. First one is just a Vacuum Pro lead. And it's something that I think I was using in Bury the Light that I did with Andrew Baina. And it was like a pretty clean sounding lead, I guess. And it was okay. And I was just going to leave it that way. There's a lot of things happening here, but I think the most important parts are I have a chorus that I automate how much it plays. Let me show you. Chorus being automated to change kind of like the texture over time. I have some distortion. These actually might not be distortions. Yep, it's convolution. Sorry, it's not distortion. I'm adding some filter stuff. And then I have a delay, that's the echo, and then I have a reverb, and then a bunch of EQs. Yeah. When I first made this and had it in the mix, I was like, it sounds like too on the nose. Like, you know how I tend to make mixes where it's like guitars, and then there's a lead synth, and I was like, I'm just doing the same thing again. I needed a different texture or flavor for this, so I messed around with this vocal sample. I have this, like, I don't really know what it is. I wonder if I can play it. Let's see. It sounds so funny. Yeah, it sounds something like that. It's a woman singing, kind of just going, ah, like that. And so I found the first note that was just a solid note, and I'm doing this loop in the sampler. Right, it has a little bit of a wash because it gets louder and softer in volume over time. But I synced up the attack time and the glide time. I don't know. Pitch bend range. One of these is glide. I synced up the glide as well. So both of these, oh, it's right here, 160. So both of these synths, or instruments, I should say, perform the same way. So now I can stack them on top of each other, and I have a much, a little bit more of a varied kind of palette of this sound. Another benefit, it sounds like it's an octave. One thing to note here, I needed the Argent compressor to save my butt, because without this, the volume fluctuates too much. Which sounds cool, but not when you're trying to make like a strong lead. So the Argent compressor just flattened it out, and that's what it's for. At the expense of some clarity, because now it's got a little bit of distortion. And then I got the rest of the stuff the same. The same. Most of these settings are copied from the other one. Soothe. Not surprising that the high part was pretty harsh on the ears, so I had to clean that up. Yep, and then the rest is the same. So I have these two leads that are kind of sharing the same sound. And then they, later on, they divert a bit. And then I introduced these last two synths. So the first is this, it says tone fat thumping, which is basically the same as like the thumper, this low bass that's like dum 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 dum, you know what I'm talking about. But I ended up changing the parameters on the fly. I think I just started with a preset, and but I didn't want to use it for bass, so it ends up sounding like this. And that is Vacuum Pro, something something Davoth. As I said, started with something else, adjusted some things, probably turned up the D-tune really high. I have Volcano on here. It's just subtly, looks like changing over time. This is probably, yep, I have a guitar cab. That's interesting. I often don't use that, but I thought it sounded pretty good. Subtly, a subtle mix of this guitar cab filter. And then, yep, just making things fit. Tube distortion. Funny that I used Saturn here. Could have used the other one. Delay, reverb, EQ. Okay, looking about the same. So that's a straightforward. All you need to know about that one is that it's a very detuned pluck. You know, I have the sustain way down, and the decay up high, and the attack really short. So it goes punk like that. And then I add a bunch of effects. And then the very last thing, I call this Guitarish Reese because of this very loud cab layer. But it's a very subtle melody that's underneath everything else in like the build-up. Kind of sounds like a guitar, huh? Like a weird one, though. Yeah, it's nice. Let me play it in context. I really like how this sounds. And then it fades out into the drums. So that's an instance of Serum doing, okay, so it actually is, it says Reese. Technically it's not a Reese bass, it's a square bass. So I have the square bass here, and then I have a little bit of this modulation to make it sound a little less square from this gritty thing for texture. And I could just change this to something else and it would totally change the overall sound, which I just did. Smart, Jeff. Nice going. Gritty. There we go. And then the most important part here is the layer, the cab. So got Zilla on here. Yeah, it's interesting because like the clean version of it still does kind of have like a cab sort of tone to it, I guess you could say, but not as strongly. Yeah. And that could be, nope, it's trash. No, it just does sound like that. Yeah, and then all the effects. Ooh, that's Comet coming back in. You can't use the on and off because it remembers and then it plays the rest of the reverb. It's weird. Yeah, Comet and Echo really doing some work. I mean, the spaciest sounding combination of stuff. It's so beautiful. Yeah, and that's the whole tune. That's everything. It's just a lot of fading in and fading out, choosing which instruments you think are important, and layering them in slowly, and filling in space. And I did my best as somebody who's made a whole bunch of heavy metal bangers in a row. This is way out of my comfort zone. But it is fun to experiment and to get the feeling right of, you know, this is a mountain climb. I just look at it. It just gets louder and gets softer, and that's the whole song. So doing that in Doom was definitely an experience. Anyway, if I skipped anything, although there was not a lot to skip, if there was any particular thing you wanted me to cover, please let me know on Discord or Instagram or Patreon, wherever. Thank you very much for watching. Also, I do look a bit like a scrub today, but when you make ambient music, you gotta be comfortable, so I am. Okay, take it easy.